So we're going to start off with our stock up, stock down. If you listen to last week's recap, we did our power rankings, and there's been a ton of shifting in the real AP, and I would say there's some shifting in the power rankings. And so I think we're going to get to the power rankings after week 4. I want to see a little bit more ball and kind of just how these teams look in their first couple conference games. I think by the end of week 4, we'll see most teams have played their first conference game. So when I think about the stock up, stock down, there's 13 SEC games across 16 SEC teams, so no bye weeks this week. And there was a specific bucket for 2 games. I kind of call it the superior versus the inferior, and it's very obvious. Tennessee versus Kent State and Ole Miss versus Wake Forest. Hunter, what were your thoughts on those games? And from a stock perspective, you buying, you selling, what you thinking?
Yeah, I think initially, shame on the ACC that we bucket Wake Forest with Kent State this week on inferior teams, but it was a beatdown on both of those. I mean, Ole Miss stock up, Tennessee stock up. We know what they can do. They've shown it additionally here this week. So I think that those stocks are both up. We see them move up in the AP poll. How do you feel about those? I mean, Texas was also kind of in there with UTSA as well.
Texas was also in there with UTSA, and that one had a unique wrinkle, and we'll get to it with the SEC, I think, co-player of the year or co-player of the week. But Tennessee, business as usual. I think, when I'm thinking about my notes for even the next episode, does a win for Tennessee over Oklahoma potentially put them to number 1? They have clearly had the most game control. They made NC State look like they didn't even belong on the same field. And with Kent State, I mean, it's just this offense, I think where they had like 58 points at halftime, something crazy like that. I mean, 37 points in the first quarter. It just, I want to see them against a tough team. But they're handling business. Ole Miss, business as usual. Jackson Dart leads the SEC in passing yards, and he's top 5 in passing touchdowns. And so Wake Forest decided before the game to end that home and home series, but Ole Miss continue to roll on like they have been.
Yeah, and these are out of Power 4 matchups aside from the Wake Forest one. On the other side of those ones that maybe went down, and Mississippi State played Toledo. When we were doing our preview last week, we mentioned them in a little bit that this wasn't going to be an easy game for them at all, and that Toledo had a pretty good shot here. And we saw a horrible performance from Mississippi State. Stock down for me. How are you feeling about Mississippi State?
Yeah, stock is way down. If it wasn't for as anemic, I think, as Florida has looked, Mississippi State could be very well at the end. And they're still kind of competing for that last spot. It feels like forever ago since they played Eastern Kentucky or EKU, and that defense, I mean, it can't stop anything. Shapen's top 5 in terms of yards in the SEC for passing, but if the defense can't stop, a group of 5 MAC team, I don't know how they're going to fare in conference.
Yeah, they had struggles stopping them. If you mentioned Florida there, we can talk more about them in depth. I can't go without it. We talked about them at the beginning. Alabama, stock up. I don't mean to shift gears, but we've been talking for 2 weeks. A lot of doubt in Alabama from the O-line play. We got to finally see the full O-line together, see Alabama moving up. They finally get a Power 4 test. I know some people are still doubting, but Alabama, stock up. They're kind of sitting at the same in the AP poll. They're at the 4 spot, but I like them.
Yeah. Stock's got to be way up for Alabama. 42 points, could have been 45. Jalen Milroe, dog. He's got 14 touchdowns in a year. He's second in the SEC in rushing touchdowns. And so we have a full breakdown coming up for them, but really impressed by that performance. And, people can say what they want to say about TVD, but, there's teams that in this conference who have not played legitimate competition. Cough, Ole Miss. Yeah. So this to me shows a lot going to Camp Randall. So their stock's definitely up. You talked about Texas versus UTSA, and I got hype, man. This Arch Manning guy, he's got a little bit of juice to him. I don't know if it's because he was raised in New Orleans or whatnot, but he's slime. He's throwing up signs, and he came in 5 touchdowns. He's got some wheels. He's got some wheels on him. 53 yards on the ground. You saw that little scamper, quick shift. He runs like a Manning, but he's got speed like Cooper.
Yeah. He showed out. I mean, there's questions now, and Does he, he'll probably play next week. And then what do they do from there? Quinn Ewers still Heisman, top tier in the Heisman hopeful list. So they have some questions there, but good for Arch to get in there and make it happen against UTSA.
Yeah. I think if you put me at quarterback with those receivers, I could get a touchdown. I'm not saying I'm winning the game, but it's like, is it a Wingo game? Is it a Matt Golden game? Is it Isaiah Bond game? What am I feeling today? I don't know.
Take your pick.
Take your pick.
Yeah. One team that's kind of in the middle where it could go either way, Kentucky. Is Kentucky up or down? They performed great against Georgia. They didn't do well offensively. The defense is great. To me, I think Kentucky is trending up after that. How are you feeling about Kentucky?
Yeah, I don't know how anyone could not say they're trending up after that performance. The defense, Deion Walker, impressive game, four tackles, shutting down Carson Beck to his lowest yard total in his whole career as a starting quarterback. Super impressive. You go into the fourth of the lead. We know where the question mark is. It's obvious, but Kentucky stock is definitely up. A way to rebound and perform coming off of that 31-6 game in week 2.
Yeah. I mean, eight straight quarters, no touchdown isn't great. It's not ideal. But they did well. Stock going up for both of us, right? We have Georgia though. To me, stock is down. You play against Kentucky, although it's a road game, it's a night game. It's the first SEC test. The offense underperforms. We see the lowest Georgia offensive output we've seen in 4 years since they played Clemson in their season opener, or 3 years. And to me, the stock isn't trending up. Either they had the slow start with Clemson, they had the slow start here. I think down. How are you feeling?
Yeah, I'm gonna put Georgia in their own unique category because they do unique things. I'm gonna say the stock didn't raise. I'll put it down 2 points. It's way too early to sell it. I think it's going to be a tough week in practice over these next 2 weeks, and they don't deserve fully getting positives, right? Like you play a game like this, you add these pieces at running back, and they're supposed to make plays in the portal. Like I need to see more from Colby Young. Where were you this game? That credits to the Kentucky defense from locking them down, but I think that performance happened 2 weeks too late. You play that way against Clemson, people probably don't think much about it. But if you're playing that way against Kentucky, where that's a middle of the road SEC school, now I'm wondering, are you really a championship contender? So I'm gonna take them from a 96 to a 94. Stock still up, but it's a little questionable. It's questionable.
That covers kind of the top 5 SEC contenders, or top 4, and then sitting right on the outside is Missouri, who they hadn't given up a point yet on defense going into this week. Finally had a test with Boston College. I think they passed that test. We're going to break it down a lot more. Missouri stock up to me because now they're showing that they can do it against better teams than what they were starting out the season with.
Yeah, you could argue that Missouri has played the best team this year out of conference. We'll see how things shake out as the season ends. Maybe Clemson's in that discussion. Obviously, best win, Miami would be the best team in terms of played against, but impressive performance. Luther Burden, welcome back to the show, kid. Love to see him, spinning up field and getting crazy in the end zone, doing what he does, and he's got something to prove here. So Missouri's stock is definitely up, and all they can do is hope that BC continues to win out from here. Yeah. When you think about when I think about some of these other teams, Auburn, New Mexico State.
Auburn, New Mexico. They finally decided to make the move on from Peyton Thorne and give Hank Brown the start. This is a good game to do it in because the stakes are a little bit lower. They did have the slow start, but Hank Brown is going to be their guy going forward. He's going to start next week against Arkansas, and he looked the part. He's now in the top 16 in the SEC in passing yards, so he showed out. We saw that deep pass that he had to Keandre Lambert-Smith that was reminiscent of a starting quarterback in the SEC and what he needs to do to make that happen. So stock is up for me on Auburn. They're not scared to make the moves to make their team better. And if that's benching a quarterback and bringing in, the redshirt freshman, that's bold. Stock up for me with Auburn. I like it.
Yeah, and that's a good game to do it, right? Do it before you're playing Arkansas next week. You never want to have a poorly timed or a bad game like Peyton Thorne had, but at least it came with a Group of 5 team in New Mexico coming into town. So 4 touchdowns for Hank. This could be his team, and maybe this sets a little bit of fear in the eyes of the Iron Bowl matchup at the end of the season. I'm never one to stir the pot, but
no. Redshirt freshman, those games take a little bit out of you. They take a little, some hair on the chest to play in that. But he looked good. And I think there's only development up from here when they play Arkansas next week. Speaking of Arkansas, to me, although they won against UAB, I think Arkansas is trending down behind sloppy play all around, putting the ball on the ground, interceptions. It's not the game that you want to see from them against UAB. I was super high on them. I think the stock is down more so because of how high I was on them after week 1, after their performance against OK State, even in the loss. This just wasn't necessarily it. Taylor Green was off. Wide receivers were missing catches. Defensively giving up 27. It wasn't a great performance.
Yeah, I would have loved to see more from Taylor Green in the air. No touchdowns passing, 2 rushing, as expected as he's delivered. Jaquindon Jackson is still one of the best running backs in the SEC. But it leaves you wanting more because you see the pieces, you see the ingredients. And for the people that maybe watch these Gordon Ramsay-esque shows, like you have these great ingredients, but you're not cooking the right recipe. Like something feels burnt, something feels too salty, undercooked. But so for me, Arkansas stock is down as well. It could go up, but I feel like we've kind of given them a little bit of leeway here these last couple of weeks. Like we've been saying, like, "Ooh, I want to see it." Okay, I see it. This was the game to show me you had it, and you won. But I would have wanted to see more. If the SEC is going to claim to be this top conference, we can't have UAB putting up 27 on you.
No,
we can't have UAB locking you down where you can't get a passing touchdown.
No, and you said ingredients. If the ingredients are good and the meal turns out bad, the head chef isn't cooking, and that's Sam Pittman. I think that's the problem. They're coming into a 7-game SEC stretch, 4 of them ranked. They need to tighten up. So I hope to see that from Arkansas. Right now, down. You mentioned Jaquindon Jackson, another former Arkansas running back that's now at South Carolina. And Raheem Rocket Sanders is playing lights out. I think South Carolina, even though they lost, stock up big time. They deserve to win that game. I'm not going to blame anything on the refs, but they showed that they could do it. They had the quarterback injury there down the stretch. I like South Carolina. I think that they're only improving.
Yeah, a lot to be positive about South Carolina. Stock way up for them. You came off of a win with Kentucky. Raheem Sanders, absolute dominant performance, over 100 yards. And if Lenore Sellers doesn't go out in that game, completely different game as well. I mean, he was absolutely slashing through, that LSU defense. And so a lot to be optimistic about. And Lenore says, I think he's only a sophomore. So hopefully he can come back and do what he was doing and keep it going upwards.
Yeah. And their opponent there, LSU, they won, but I don't know.
Very underwhelming. Very underwhelming. I think was one interception for Garrett. Maybe 2 or 3 if there's not these penalties. Like at the end of the day, the ball did get caught by someone else, whether or not he was blocked a certain way. That was a pick. So it's not great to watch that. That the team just couldn't really stop much. So we have a lot of thoughts. We're going to dig into kind of LSU a little bit more. Dig positively, dig negatively. But if you're a fan in Baton Rouge, I don't think you feel good about that win. There's not many things to take away to say, "Ooh, that felt great." Yeah. So stock down there for them.
I think we're kind of coming up on the end here. Vanderbilt stock down. We were high on them at the beginning. They showed that win against Virginia Tech, and then they lose to Georgia State. Underperforming defensively, making the mistakes, the fumble from Pavia, the safety, which was a horrible mistake, just not having your head in the game. It's more reminiscent of the Vanderbilt team that we've known in the SEC for years. Are they getting back to their old ways? I don't know. Hopefully they can turn it around, but they're getting into SEC play now.
Yeah, and like I said, like when the SEC wins, we take the glory, they take the glory. When they lose, you got to call a spade, and this is a team that you're not supposed to lose to. Georgia Tech took care of business on the ACC side against Georgia State. And so I expected to see the same thing because in my mind, Virginia could be a better team than or Virginia Tech, who they beat, was supposed to be a better team than Georgia Tech. And I would expect Vanderbilt to win here. You shouldn't be in a position where you're going to lose that game. Still impressed with what we're seeing from Pavia, minus the turnover, as you had mentioned before. But they're down. It's not way in the depths, but it's not where you want to go going into conference play with Missouri next week.
No, not at all. We have last one, or we got maybe a couple more. I mean, Oklahoma stock up. The defensive side of the ball, they look great. They're giving up points in the games, but they're able to put consistent pressure on, making quarterbacks work for it. Jackson Arnold, complete dual threat. Almost 100 yards on the ground and 2 touchdowns. They're getting him going because they didn't have the right running back play early on in the year. They're trying to find that rhythm still. This was a great game against Tulane, 34-19. So I like Oklahoma.
Yeah, I really did like Oklahoma there, and it was close with Tulane. Tulane is 2 years removed from a Cotton Bowl win against USC, and this could be the year of the Group of 5, but less about Tulane. Props to Oklahoma for scheduling a tough-ish out of conference. Houston, Power 4, Tulane, good Group of 5, Temple, respectable Group of 5 conference opponent, right? But for this game, like you said, Jackson Arnold had a 24-yard scamper. You got to see more on the running back side for Oklahoma, and they're taking care of business. Like it's a very clean 3-0. There's some close parts of the game, but it never fully feels like they're out of control of the game. Maybe outside of that Houston game at the end.
Yeah.
So stock up. I'm riding with Jackson Arnold. Stock way up.
All right.
And did we hit A&M in Florida?
We hit Florida a little bit. Stock down. I mean, A&M, I'd say stock up. They are starting to find a little bit of rhythm. They did it behind Marcel Reed. I don't think that was the entirety of the story of the week. The O-line played better. The D-line played better. We'll talk more about this game in depth, but stock up. They're putting the pieces together, and it's looking more like what we expected from A&M coming into the year.
Yeah, and they needed it, right? Yeah, they what do they say? A Chrysler 300 looks like a Phantom until a Phantom pulls up, and and Texas is that Phantom. First year in the conference, number 1 in the conference in terms of the rankings, and A&M, big brother, little brother. I don't know, but the stock's up. Yeah. It's a very volatile stock, but I think if you ride with Marcel Reed at the helm, I think you look to be in a better spot. I think if you're in the air around the quarterback, we could touch on what we do with that on the next segment.
Yeah. We can talk lastly about Florida. I know you mentioned them in passing. Florida at the bottom, probably as far as the stock goes. They are the most beatable looking team in the SEC. Not one unit was really firing on all cylinders at any game this year. Bottom, stock down.
Yeah, their stock's crashed. It might be time for someone else to buy that stock, or maybe a buyout. I don't know. So that was probably the least impressive performance out of all of the teams in the conference this week, in my opinion. You could make a case for Mississippi State. You could make a case for Vanderbilt, but Florida didn't. I have not seen them play one good quarter of football in the 12 quarters that we've watched them play. No. And I can't say that about the other teams in the conference. I've seen some decently competitive football from them. Yeah,
might be time for some changes in Gainesville. We'll see. I mean, that wraps it up for stock up, stock down. Any last thoughts there? I think it's a good balance of ones that are up and down. Truly.
Yeah, great balance. Loved what I saw from the top 5 within the conference outside of Georgia. In terms of stock down, I think there's some clear windows of improvement, and the teams that made the jump that are outside the top 5 in terms of Auburn, in terms of SC, and in terms of Kentucky would be in that bucket that you had last week, where it's like, can they put it all together? And you're starting to see some of the pieces get put together, whether it's in a win or a loss, to have those stocks go up.